So again, welcome everybody, and we are going to get started, so we respect your time. We're so thrilled to have a good group of people here on the Thursday afternoon of what I'm now calling Ag Week. I'm Dawn Thilmany from the Department of Ag and Resource Economics, and also play a leadership role both in the Extension Food Systems team here at CSU and with the Colorado Food Systems Advisory Council, all who are partners on the project we're going to introduce to you today. I first want to start out by introducing my two colleagues who are co-leads on this, Dr. Becca Jablonski and Dr. Graff. You'll be hearing from them yet today, so they'll introduce themselves a little bit more. But I also, as I introduce this process, which we're calling the Colorado Blueprint for Colorado Food and Agriculture, I also want to introduce the partners who have been as important as the process, and we're really fortunate that we have people from most of these groups here today. So I'm going to introduce our partner groups, and if you're a part of those partner groups, please stand up and be recognized as being part of this process. First, we have the College of Agricultural Sciences here at Colorado State University. There's some of you here, stand up. Don't make me call on you. We have the Ag Experiment Station here at Colorado. Stand up. We have the Colorado Department of Agriculture. A few of you are here. We have Live Well Colorado. We have the Office of Vice President for Engagement. I don't know if I did see anyone from there. And then, of course, we have the Colorado Food Systems Advisory Council, if you'll all stand. And give them a round of applause for everything they've done to make this happen. And in our small group exercise later, you'll get a chance to get to know some of them as your host in some of the small group exercises. So we're here quickly to tell you a little bit about the process, but to also be humble in saying we can't even hit all the highlights here today. So we're giving you a glimpse into a process we hope you invest in learning a little bit more about by doing a deeper dive into some of the materials we made available. And part of the reason it's such a big process with so many highlights is we took on the grand challenge of trying to map out a pretty extensive value chain for Colorado food and agriculture. Graff had done this before, and we gave him the challenge, what if we add some other components? What if we add natural resources? What if we add those consumers? What if we add post-consumer and that food waste issue everyone talks about? And then what if we embed it in communities and natural resources? And after his eyes got done being glossed over, he accepted the challenge with us, but that's where we needed to bring in all these partners, so we had a really good sense of where agriculture and food really are embedded in our communities. So why are we doing this? We are doing this because we felt like there wasn't quite the connective tissue, collaboration, and connection going on in the discussions about everything that really does influence and affect food and agriculture, and all the things that food and agriculture itself affects. So you can see a list of the things we really had as our top priorities. We really weren't calling this a grand plan, but we felt it was a really good way to start giving some visioning and some direction to a lot of partners you just heard about who were looking for what was the next place they could be impactful in the state. So what it means in terms of what we've added to structure here is we had three processes that were kind of coming together all at the same time. First is a public attitude survey that the Colorado Department of Agriculture has been doing 25 years. They had the vision that long ago that we wanted to really keep our eye on the pulse of where Coloradans felt about our industry. That was just updated in 2016. That report is done. So we already have that information to share at the website I'll mention later. Second, we had this update of the value chain of Colorado food and agriculture that Greg was going to start taking on, which really took a deep dive into the secondary data that can tell the story of not just the economics of our industry, but who are the players, what are they doing, and so we had that process already starting up. And then we added a process, somewhat with the guidance of that Colorado Food Systems Advisory Council, of going out and talking to communities across the state and industries across the state and other stakeholders across the state about what was top of mind for them. And it really dovetailed well. And although it's been a great and fruitful process, as you can imagine, it's complex. So what we want to share with you today is the highlights again of this process, starting with the fact that we've been talking about a year about putting this together. A lot of you have seen us already this year as we went out and did community processes. Some of these reports have already been shared online. If you haven't had a chance to look at them, we're going to invite you to do that today. But today really marks kind of the first stage of the blueprint rollout. We have the majority of the reports and data compiled. We have a synthesis of those community conversations compiled. So this is the chance where we can say we're close to done, but we still can use a little bit more input from you all if we've hit the mark and we've captured everything we should about what's top of mind in our community. Oops. And I did want to point out, some of you are watching this by live stream, whether you're here live or joining us by live stream. We do have a Twitter hashtag. That's as much as I know how to say about Twitter, that if you want to post a question here today, we're capturing those. We're going to try to answer as many as we can here today real time, but if we don't get them answered in this session, we'll make sure those get responded to over the next couple of days. So please do interact with us if you're comfortable doing so. So let me start with that first piece of the puzzle we pulled together, and that's the public attitudes of Colorado food and agriculture. Again, we've replicated a study that's been done several times before. Our department here at Ag and Resource Economics has only done the last two, but each time we challenged the Department of Agriculture to let us add a few more questions, and specifically more questions about not just agriculture, but how food is a part of our Coloradans' lives. We have a fairly good sample that's representative of the whole state. We asked about 33 questions this time because we had a co-sponsor, the Colorado Fruit and Vegetable Association, who wanted to know some of those same insights about what consumers were thinking. And you can see the realm of issues we covered. And so throughout this presentation and any of the reports you pick up, we'll share highlights again of how those attitudes flavored some of our report. The Department of Agriculture itself put together a really beautiful infographic that's available at the website we're going to share with you if you've not been there before. And it really does a really good job of communicating some of the highlights of what we found in that attitude report. But again, you'll see more of those findings today. So with that, I'm going to turn the stage over to Greg Graff to talk a little bit about the value chain of agriculture and how it helped inform our process.
I'm on Thelma White. I think the word blueprint is very appropriate to this overall process because it reflects both a recording of the structure of something and illustrating it for what it is, how it is, what is so. But also, if you think about it, blueprints are usually used in some sort of design or construction process, and therefore, they have what we in economics call a normative side to them, a design element that maybe can tell us where we can go forward. But the piece that I want to share with you here with regards to the value chain of Colorado agriculture may be a little bit more of just the more objective reporting out of what is so about the structure of the state's agricultural and food industries. This is replicating a study that we did in 2014 that was part of the Office of Economic Development and International Trade's Colorado Blueprint during the first term of Governor Hickenlooper, which was described as a grassroots or a bottom-up economic development plan, in which agriculture was but one of 14 key industries that had been identified. We were asked here at CSU, however, to take the lead on the convening and the analysis of the agricultural industry within the state of Colorado, and that was the point of that one. The point of this is to provide a comprehensive data foundation. This data is out there. The problem is it's in about 12 different pots, some of them from the federal government, from USDA, from the census, the business census. Others are coming from state-level agencies. Some are coming from industry-specific studies. And what we're trying to do here is really just synthesize them, bring them all together into one place. It's a pretty big undertaking. The U.S. Department of Commerce, in conjunction with our North American trade partners, have a classification system called NEX codes, North American Industry Classification System, that you see on the screen. And we are encompassing about 225 of the core NEX codes when we talk about agriculture and food, all the way from inputs, seeds and fertilizers and things like that, all the way down to the post-consumer, as Dawn was describing to you earlier. In order to give you a quick view of this, on the next slide, we have a short video that the college has prepared to give you a little bit more of a gut sense of what we mean by this. go.
You have this working. You guys got it?
Nope.
We'll do it one more time.
How does my food go from farm to table? How are agricultural and food businesses connected? The agricultural value chain illustrates the series of steps that convert raw materials to consumer purchases. The value chain begins with natural resources, land and water. In addition to responsibly tapping natural resources, the agricultural industry plays an important environmental stewardship role that benefits consumers both directly and indirectly. Science and technology are critical to the core of the value chain, crop production and livestock production. These farms and ranches set the rest of the industry in motion. Some commodities immediately loop back to other farms and ranches. Harvested feed and fodder is used in livestock production. The resulting manure is used as fertilizer in crop production. Most agricultural commodities move on to become ingredients in food and beverage manufacturing and in other industries like biofuels. Wholesalers then supply retailers with the products that are sold in supermarkets, restaurants, or other businesses that serve you, the consumer. The success of agriculture impacts virtually everything, from the wildlife and livestock that depend on our land and water, to consumers who enjoy meat, grains, fruits and vegetables and other products, to the vitality of our rural and urban communities and businesses. This simplified model of the agricultural value chain just scratches the surface of a complex industry. It's important to understand the challenges and opportunities across the value chain in order to promote strategic investments in innovation and growth. For more, visit our website.
Well, hopefully we can work on figuring out advancing this slide. The piece of this project that I got to lead up along with Libby Christensen in the back is the regional and industry town halls. And this was a really fun process for me, especially as someone who's only been in the state for about 3 years. Who here was part of a regional advisory team? If you could just raise your hand. So you can see we had incredible regional advisory teams in each of our 9 regions. The state was divided up based on where we have agricultural experiment stations and research centers. We do not have a research center in the northwest corner of the state, so you can see we created one. Jean's very happy about that. And we also don't have one currently in the Denver metro area, but we added one there. I'll also note that we didn't actually hold a town hall meeting in the city and county of Denver. And that's because we've been working closely with the city and county of Denver, who just completed their own Denver food vision and plan. And so we worked to integrate that voice through their process, which was very comprehensive. So in total, we held 13 of these regional town hall meetings. We had almost 250 people who participated, and we actually had way more than that who registered to attend. And so we think they've been engaged through the website. You can see we've had a lot of hits to our website. We also had 4 industry town halls. We found that a number of our industry partners actually wanted not to have so much of the inclusive process of the town hall where it wasn't so much talking at folks, but actually engaging people in a process, and that they really wanted to, that some of the industry groups wanted to just have us explain what was sort of happening so that they could process internally. And we had another 10 of those meetings involving a lot of people. So there have been a huge number of individuals and organizations in all parts of the state that really were involved in this process. And here's a few pictures. We have many, many more. But hopefully what you can see from these pictures is that people really were working hard. These were in general 2-hour sessions, and we did not let anybody sit in the sidelines, right? We were really doing our best to have an engaged process where we could get feedback from people. You can understand that from the value chain, we're collecting certain kinds of information, we're collecting certain pieces of data, but that's not telling necessarily the whole story of the lived experience of what people actually experience in their communities, and we wanted to make sure we could capture that as much as possible. So what we did then with these 3 processes was to identify 8 cross-cutting opportunities. And I will just also mention that one of the key roles of these regional advisory teams was to narrow down some of the topics of discussion that they felt were most meaningful in their communities or to their industry before we actually had the meetings. And one of the other really important things to note about these regional advisory teams is that they were made up of 4 key groups that we thought would bring in a broad group of stakeholders from agriculture and the food system. That includes the Colorado Food Policy Network, which really tends to be more food security and health focused and is coordinated by Live Well Colorado. The second was a member from the research centers or the Ag Experiment Station. A third is a member of our Colorado Food Systems Extension team, or if there wasn't someone from the Food Systems Extension team, someone from Extension more broadly. And then fourth, we had somebody from the Colorado Food Systems Advisory Council. So I think it was a really great group that could reach into lots of different pockets. So what we're going to do now for the remainder of our time talking up here is to just give you a highlight within each of these 8 cross-cutting opportunity areas. We have a full report for you that is now available on the website, as Dawn mentioned. We really encourage you to go and take a look. This is a draft report still. We are going to integrate comments that come in, but please note that what we tried to do as part of this process is to be true to what we heard at these regional meetings. So on the website right now, there's a regional opportunity report that was produced for each region, so you can go and see exactly what was discussed in those conversations. If a topic was brought up multiple times to the point where we felt like it was an important statewide issue, then it was included in this synthesis. So if you were at a particular regional meeting and you don't see that everything that you brought up was reflected then in the synthesis, that's probably why. We really did our best to try to include the things that were brought up as themes. So one, under the auspice of create and retain ag and food firms, what we saw was the opportunity for cooperative efforts for fuller utilization of existing infrastructure and assets. And so one really great highlight that we thought we'd provide is for Stuffin' Mellows. Who knows that company? Has anyone seen it? I've seen it in Whole Foods recently. I think it might even be in King Soopers as well. It's in where? Costco, okay, so they're all over the place now. So this was started by a couple people who were actually in the business school at CSU, and they took Introduction to Entrepreneurship class, okay, when they were in the business school. That's how they met. And so they had to come up with a business idea as part of this class, and actually the idea that they came up with, I think it was a few hours before they were about to present, they realized somebody had actually already done that idea. So in those few hours, they had to come up with a new idea, and this is what they actually came up with. And then, fast forward a few years, they kept really thinking about this idea, and they actually entered a CSU pitch competition, and they won, and they got a little bit of seed money to actually launch this business, and they found a small-scale facility that was willing to help them develop a prototype. Unfortunately, that facility didn't really allow them to be able to scale to full production, right? And it didn't allow them to produce at a scale that was going to make them so that they were going to be actually an economically viable business. And so what they did is they contacted a company called the Food Corridor. The Food Corridor, another interesting CSU example. I think it's probably the first example of a student who got a PhD jointly in the Department of Ag and Resource Economics and Food Science and Human Nutrition. And what she saw is that these kitchen incubators were being launched across the country, right? But that there wasn't really a good network connector, right? Especially an innovative solution to figure out how do we figure out actually what underutilized assets exist in our community and how do we connect them with entrepreneurs. You can kind of think of it as an Airbnb for kitchen incubators and for entrepreneurs, right? So she launched this business. So this company contacted her and she put them in contact with the school district, right, in Greeley. Because it turns out that the school district isn't using their facilities after 2 p.m. And they have this beautiful facility where we can actually go and process product. And actually one of the things, because of the cost savings of producing now at Greeley, they've been able to spend more time going out throughout the state to try to source more Colorado-grown products. So it's a great example of how we can actually utilize these underutilized assets, because we have a lot of assets in the state. This is something we've been working on with the Colorado Department of Agriculture and a grad student in the Department of Ag and Resource Economics, Claire Sheridan. And we've gotten a list from a number of our state's regulatory agencies to say, who is actually buying Colorado-grown and raised products? And we can actually now map them out. So CDA for a long time has kept a list of co-packers, but it's not just CDA necessarily that would have some of the folks on this list. And there's a strong possibility that there's a number of these folks that could provide services, co-packing services or other kinds of services for potential entrepreneurs, right, or innovators in the state. And so thinking about how we can utilize those assets more fully is really a great opportunity. And it's not just about these existing facilities, right? It's also about using some of our other kinds of assets that we have, right? So equipment is another great example. We had about $100 million, right, in revenue from custom work in the state last year, or in 2015, excuse me, right? So this is a great example of a farmer who has a piece of equipment, their neighbor who doesn't have that piece of equipment, and we can both provide additional income for that farmer as the equipment, and we can keep that other farmer from having to go out and actually go and purchase more equipment or to actually go and get another loan, right? This is a great opportunity in the state. Number 2, develop workforce and youth to support the food and ag sectors. So one of the opportunities that we saw there is integrating ag and food curriculum that's well suited for all stages of education. So 4-H and FFA, I will say, are maybe the one thing that came up in every single town hall session that we heard. And you're going to get to hear that later when we have the panel and we have Kellyanne's. But one example of some of those opportunities is actually through an innovative partnership that's going on right now between Google and 4-H. So in 22 states across the country, Google's provided support in terms of computers or software, in terms of direct funding, to actually get more of this curriculum into 4-H, right? Kids are getting really excited about ag tech, right, about the digital economy. They're getting trained in a way that I think employers are going to want in the future, and there's lots more opportunities to do this. One of the other really cool things that's happening as part of this program are these virtual learning experiences. So people in urban places who maybe haven't spent time in a rural place, or vice versa, right, kids in rural places haven't been to urban places, can actually go out and do this virtual experiential learning, right? What a great way to get people excited and to create opportunities to support sort of the next generation and the next generation within workforce and youth development. So I don't know how many of you actually got to hear Secretary Vilsack speak yesterday, but one of the things that he noted is the importance of talking about not just agriculture, but agriculture and food together, right? That's really important to keep them aligned. And I think one of the things that we can see from the value chain work about why this is important is that as we take on some of those additional supply chain pieces, right, we move further along the value chain, we see that our workforce becomes more diverse, right, in terms of gender and other measures as well. And we also see that the income goes up for the people who are working there, right? So opportunities to maybe blend more agriculture and food is really another opportunity. And also it's something we heard from some of the younger people who were at some of these meetings about the things that excite them. Third is promote the Colorado brand. Better position Colorado ag and food firms to exploit changing consumer and market trends. We heard this a lot. One of the great things about being in the state of Colorado is that the Colorado brand is strong, right? The Colorado flag is ubiquitous. I can't believe how often I see the Colorado flag around here, right? And there's lots of opportunities within agriculture and food to exploit this more fully than we're doing. And so Rocky Ford was actually brought up by one of the speakers today, right? Rocky Ford Mellon, very, very well known. And they've actually worked together to do more branding to really support that Colorado product. And they've worked with Colorado Proud and the Colorado Department of Agriculture to do that. Another good example comes from one of our industry town halls where we had a meeting with the liquid arts, the beverage arts, right? The Colorado Distillers Guild, the Brewers Association, as well as the Colorado wine industry. And what they talked about is the fact that in certain parts of the country, you actually see something distinct, right? When you think about California beer, there's certain kinds of attributes that you may associate with that. But that is less true in a place like Colorado. And is there actual interest in doing that? And would that serve to actually further sales and innovation if we can think about what are those attributes that we want associated with these Colorado beverages, right? So there's a lot more opportunity there and things that we can do, and we have specific action items related to that. And Colorado Proud, right, the Colorado Department of Ag has been doing for many years, I don't know how many, but you can see that 59% of Coloradans have purchased Colorado Proud branded products, right? An additional 27% have heard of Colorado Proud. We can do a lot to leverage Colorado Proud, right? And maybe that's going to be through regional branding efforts that also leverage Colorado Proud. Maybe it's also marketing Colorado Proud in different kinds of ways. And so I think we can work together to think innovatively about that. And for the first time this year, Dawn mentioned that the Colorado Fruit and Vegetable Growers Association actually partnered directly with us on this public attitude survey. You can see for almost all of these commodities that we have that at least 50% of Coloradans have heard of these products, right? They may not have all actually purchased them, right? But at least 50% have heard of almost all of them. So there are many more things that we can do to help leverage these known sort of entities and brands within the state, and there's lots of opportunities there.
And again, Becca did a great job of introducing this, but beyond the fact that we're sharing these highlights, you'll get a chance to actually look at more details. And so one of the places we were skittish to enter conversation was about the regulatory environment. No one likes the government. There's a lot of red tape. But what we did feel like we could really address is the fact that we can make that environment more friendly, both for the businesses who are trying to navigate it, but increasingly consumers who are also trying to understand all of the labels and regulations that are meant to protect them there. Well, there we had some really nice ideas come up as well, including work to ensure that regulatory environment is fair and effective in meeting its goals. I think we all know we want some regulations and policies if they are truly protective, but they also can stand up to some scrutiny about whether they're formulated in a way that's ever biased against a certain type of producer or a size of producer. And so one example we gave of things that are already going on is that Colorado was fortunate to have the leadership to bring a food safety center here to Colorado State University, and part of their mission has really been to be true to helping all size of producers learn how to navigate that system better. We have a world-renowned meat safety facility that we're only trying to augment the effectiveness of. And then we also have those retailers who have told us, and we saw this morning, that they're bringing new technology online to assure a safe environment for them. But this actually had a really interesting interface because at the same time we want to lower food waste, part of that paradigm of solving the food waste problem is what the regulatory environment is going to allow us to do, and we may have to rethink some of that in that context. We also felt we had to be committed to how scale impacts market performance, access, and opportunities. Greg has a great schematic on this in the value chain report, but most of our production is among a very small handful of producers, but we have thousands and thousands of producers who've chosen to take on farming as an occupation and keep it at a scale level that makes it a little harder for them to compete sometimes in a global environment. So we felt like a theme we heard throughout the state was providing market research, outreach, and mentoring programs to help improve the viability of businesses no matter the scale. So it really goes quite hand in hand with that create and retain businesses, but particularly with the focus of, are we ever doing things that might unintentionally hurt smaller or bigger guys with the way we formulate our programs? And again, we have several projects going on that you can see there that are already addressing that. So in all of these cases, we already are addressing these issues. I think this was the state telling us they're worth doubling down on. So again, this is the schematic that Greg has put together, just showing you that it's very skewed. We have a handful of producers who are very large, maybe even have the capacity to staff up or hire their own consultants to help them navigate the increasingly complex business environment. But if you look at where the real numbers are in our state of the number of people who need assistance from the Land Grant University and our other partners, we have thousands of people who could use more support because some of these programs have not been particularly geared towards them. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Greg to talk about a couple of the other issues.
The sixth cross-cutting issue was to innovate and support new technologies and new businesses in food and agriculture. And this is something that we've been historically great at in Colorado. We can go all the way back to the Adolf Coors in the 1800s and the start of our beer industry, even there. And we've been characterized by new firms innovating in natural and organic foods. Celestial Seasonings was one of the pioneers, founded in 1969. And so that also has some pretty deep roots in Colorado. From the regional and industry town halls, we were hearing feedback about essentially trying to just keep this going. And one example that has been pretty close to CSU has been the partnership with Ardent Mills. Ardent Mills is the now largest wheat milling company in America, if not North America or even the world. And upon the formation of Ardent Mills, about 3 years ago, they chose to relocate their headquarters from the traditional Midwestern Mississippi River Valley locations for the milling industry here to Colorado. Michelle Hadwiger from the Office of Economic Development shared a little bit of that story on the finance panel earlier this morning during the AgInnovation Summit. But one of the essences of that relocate decision on the part of Ardent Mills had to do with tapping into a culture of innovation that they felt they would find in Denver and Colorado that may be harder for them to have found in, say, Minneapolis or Kansas City. And then we have the examples, of course, of just quite a number of other smaller food brands. Now, some of them not so small any longer. Boulder Brands has obviously become a very significant player in the natural and whole food sector with many household names. Noosa, which came from Morning Fresh Dairy in Bellevue, Colorado, just right over there. A multi-generational dairy farm with a very robust local delivery system, innovated and introduced a new yogurt initially within the home delivery community that they already service, and absolutely went global. And they're now in Walmart, the Kroger stores, and they're national at this point. Izzy, another success story from the Colorado Front Range of juices beverage company. It's probably ubiquitous. My kids ask for an Izzy all the time, and so they are all over the place. But continuing to nurture the environment where new starts like this can be happening today, can be happening tomorrow, and can know that by being here in this environment, they're going to be supported, they're going to be financed, they're going to be mentored, they're going to make the connections they need in order to get into those retail outlets in order to truly succeed. And then, just an illustration that we brought from the value chain. This is from actually the last round of analysis that we did. We're updating these data currently, where we looked at the research publications and the US patents being generated within the state of Colorado and mapped them down to the zip code or the municipal area where the invention or the publication were made. Publications are in red, patents are in blue. and you can see the very interesting clustering phenomenon here in the Northern Front Range.
You can keep the microphone. So the last two topics that we have, you'll actually hear a little bit more on as well in our panel. But one thing we set out to look at is improve access to capital. But what we really found is that financial capital and money is one thing that our industry is looking for, but there's other resources that are in short supply, everything from land and water to really, if you want to stretch it, even human capital and the educational resources they need. So one of the action items we came up with is technical assistance and business support services to support succession planning, both for farm families and those who are interested in playing a role in supporting ag and farm operations. And so we have a number of examples going on in the state that are supporting that. You'll hear a little bit more about some of these later, including Colorado Building Farmers and the Poudre Valley Community Farms. But I guess what we were interested in seeing is that education came up in the most diverse number of ways possible. Community colleges, 4-H, K through 12, farm to school, community gardens. And I guess what it really made us realize is that we are setting up a future generation to be more appreciative of this industry, but we have to make sure we have pathways they can see themselves entering the industry, and that means access to land, water, and capital if they do choose to actually take this on as a occupation. And it's not clear we've unraveled that puzzle yet. But we do have some partners who've really stepped up. Again, you'll hear from one of those. But for instance, there's a series of lenders who now have specific targeted programs who are aimed at young, beginning, and small farmers, which is what the YBS stands for. So we're, again, seeing lots of activities start to be piloted where they're meant to address some of these barriers. And again, all this report, I think, does is double down that those are needed, those are effective, and we'd love to see more. And finally, we had one kind of big catch-all category, which is how agriculture is part of vibrant communities. And the reasons we decided to embed that way is that perhaps we think it's been a little too subtle and too silent how important ag is to the quality of life of our communities, how important food is to the security of our households. And so we kind of had a catch-all there. And from the value chain, again, you see that this state has been committed to this. We have some of the highest levels of protected lands that Coloradans have chosen to put their money behind and protect in the state so that they will maintain as working lands. And on the other end of the spectrum from production agriculture, we have food security issues in our communities that are front and center. So one partner data set that we had mentioned earlier is that LiveWell Colorado had invested in Community Commons, which is a data platform where you can go and for your own community, your own county, your own region, you can create maps of a whole lot of dimensions of how ag and food enter into your community. And so what you see is there's everything from metrics about food-related health incidents to purchase decisions that people in your community are making. So even if you want to get a more scaled-down version of what this looks like in your community, you can. But one thing that we heard in all the town halls is that no community is created equal, and the access and security challenges for people in the state are varied and diverse, and that we need lots of different tools and solutions to try to address those. So this is actually a nice infographic that was put together by the food security community that we were happy to integrate into our report, and it just talks a little bit about that this is not just about food security. Food security is economic development. Food security is workforce development. And so that's why the food security and food access piece really almost in a nuanced way enter into every part of the conversation we've already had about how food and agriculture need to be supported in this state. And again, this is backed up by the public attitudes of our Coloradans. When we ask people about whether agriculture was important to their quality of life, consistently over the last 25 years, over 90% have said it's very important or important or very important to them. And then when we dig a little deeper, and in this case and with this graphic, we asked a little bit more about their ways that they want to protect it. So there's other graphics in the report that actually show that land conservation goes hand in hand in this. Just like we see a very high share wanting to have agriculture because it's part of their quality of life. They're also willing, again, to put their money where their mouth is and support it through land conservation. And as the map we showed before, that actually is happening. They're not just saying it, they're doing it. So, welcome to the conversation. We just gave you a lot of information very quickly, but this is in no means the only way that you can interface with this process. First of all, we welcome you to visit our website. A fuller version of all of the data and reports that you have seen glimpses of today are available there for download, for you to peruse. And I think we're even very comfortable, except for the synthesis of communities that has draft on it, that you can start actually citing it in your own planning discussions with your group. Today, or after today, if you want to use our Twitter hashtag, again, I don't know how to use that terminology, that's a way to end the conversation, but today particularly, we'd like you to give us questions that way. And we want you to review these draft reports, and if you hadn't known there was a regional report for your region, please go visit that. But before you leave today, we're going to make you stay in the conversation today in a couple other ways. What we're going to transition to now is we're going to transition to a panel. So this is the website I referenced before. We're going to have you transition to a panel, and the panel is going to be the way to have a very active conversation today. And what we did is we invited people to this panel who were meant to address at least 2 of those 8 issues that we brought up. We were very selective in choosing people who had really great insights on a couple of the things we've already highlighted today. And Greg is going to lead that here after the break. And then after that, if you'll stick around further, then you all get a chance to go visit one of these posters around the room that's those 8 highlighted issue areas and do a deeper dive with us about what you want to know about how you can get involved. So for now, I'm going to thank our sponsors once again. Do we want to give people a break to get drinks and food, or do we want to keep going? We're
Are you okay? Okay, let's keep going.
yeah, no one's going to be offended if you go ahead over. So again, as we transition to the panel, and I ask the panelists to start coming up, I do ask you to start sending questions you have already, questions you have throughout this panel, and visit the website while we do this transition, but let's try to start here again in about 2 or 3 minutes.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, if we can go ahead and grab that cup of coffee or that glass of water and find ourselves a seat. We've brought together a group with just really an amazing diversity of background up here for you to engage with. And as Dawn just prefaced, we've got maybe 1 or 2 of these cross-cutting issues that are on the posters around the perimeter of the room, which you saw us walk through here in the preceding 15 minutes. What I'd like to do is introduce the panelists, let them actually introduce. I want to ask you guys to introduce yourselves because I think you can tell your story a little bit better. But as you do so, if you wouldn't mind framing or at least wrapping up by picking one of those 8 cross-cutting issues that is top of mind or depth of heart for you as an individual in your professional engagements and in what you've been called to do in life. And we'll start with Tom. If you'd please share with us what you do and what resonates.
I'm a relationship loan officer with American Ag Credit. You can see part of this stuff up on the screen. I've been doing this for quite a while. I got a few good years when things were going well in the 70s before we hit the dark ages of the 80s for ag and finance. And then things got a little bit better. And in the last few years, seen some of the best years as far as a return to ag operations. And more recently, that's disappeared, and we're back to how low can your break even be? So it's an interesting ride when you're dealing with commodities and the changes in that market. Of the 8 factors, access to capital is kind of obviously comes my direction, since the name of the company I work with was also on that screen. So we're always interested in how we can improve the delivery of capital and our YBS program, we do different things with that, trying to find ways that we can help operations get going.
And next, we'll hand it over to Adrian Card.
Good afternoon. Thanks everybody for being here. I'm Adrian Card with Colorado State University Extension in Boulder County. I'm the Agriculture Extension Agent, and I've been wearing that hat for almost 14 years now. Came through CSU as an undergrad and a master's student, and have roots that go as far back as seeing where the current stadium is. There was once a garden there, so if you remember that, that was one of the beginnings of some of my career. But in terms of the blueprint, I think my work, as you see one of the logos, I guess I got the extra branded slide here. The Colorado Building Farmers Program works to help beginning farmers develop business planning and management skills. So in that context, I think it's supporting new firms, agricultural firms, so I'm doing work in that space. The one, I think it's number 4 over there. I don't have all these memorized, but you heard mentioned that funded the public attitude survey, the Colorado Fruit and Vegetable Growers Association, my second logo there. It is helping to producers to better navigate the emerged Food System Modernization Act, some of the food safety compliance aspects of managing labor, the Worker Protection Standard Act that helps growers protect workers from pesticides. So intercepting that aspect of the blueprint there. And I think finally, if I were to name another one, and I think this is what this one means, this integrating ag and vibrant communities. I work closely with partners at the county level in Boulder County from Parks and Open Space in Boulder County and City of Boulder Open Space and Mountain Parks. We're unique in the state, as we mentioned in the presentation, of having lots of public ag land. This is agriculture in the urban interface. Boulder County's 300,000 people, so how we help those citizens better appreciate what it takes to maintain viable agriculture. It's an ongoing conversation. We've done that with bus tours, other aspects of public engagement, notwithstanding having what we've done called Farmer Talk Tuesdays, where we figured out the best way to get people to want to learn more about agriculture is to serve them beer. So we would go to breweries in Boulder County and have a host of panelists we talk to about agricultural issues. So pleased to be with you today.
Excellent. Thank you, Adrian. Kelly, please.
Well, good afternoon. I'm Kelly Enns. I'm an associate professor in the Department of Ag and Resource Economics, specifically in agricultural education. So really my specialty is really training future teachers for the high school setting, and then also working with other instructors in that teaching and learning process for non-formal environments like extension or nonprofits or anything like that. So of all of the areas, I think obviously the workforce development is a big deal for me. I spent almost 10 years in the high school classroom and about 20 years in teaching and trying to bring up that next generation of agriculturalists. And so that's certainly an area that resonates with me.
Excellent. Thank you, Kelly. And finally, last, by no means least, Nick, please.
Hi, my name is Nick Kuntz. With my wife and I, we operate Native Hill Farm. We're a small, diversified organic farm right near here. Year-round vegetable production, CSA, farmers markets, restaurants, it's all on there. And we also work with Poudre Valley Community Farms, which I'm sure will come up later, which is a farmland ownership cooperative that we're trying to pioneer here in the area to answer some of these questions. I think the main 2 items that come to my mind are number 7, which is access to capital, specifically stable land and water access, is a huge thing that I probably think about daily. And as well as, and I think that resonates with number 8, which is the integration of ag into vibrant communities through land preservation and projects like Poudre Valley Community Farms and other stuff going on like in Boulder County. And I also have to mention I would not be here without Adrian's help and Dawn and Martha and a bunch of other unnamed people. We are in business because of CSU and CSU Extension and all of the support we get there. It's pretty exciting, for better or worse.
Well, excellent, and thank you, folks. So the general theme that we're flying under here in this discussion ahead, first of all, borrowing from the AgInnovation Summit that's just been wrapping up in this room this morning and up through lunchtime, has been cultivating innovation. And that is a huge mandate, and some of our discussion was, well, how do we narrow that down? Well, we're going to do it a little bit here by simply focusing in on production agriculture, on farming and ranching for now. You saw about the value chain reaching all the way from natural resources to the final consumer, and maybe a given farm like Native Hill will kind of touch the whole value chain because of the local nature of the distribution and marketing that Nick and Katie do. But we're going to focus on production agriculture. And we're going to look at some of the access and capital issues, and really looking at questions about bringing together the right people with the right financing and the right natural resources, the land and the water, in order to enable not just continuation of business as usual, but to enable innovation within production agriculture, to enable folks like Nick and many, many others that are trying to maybe do it a slightly different way, and in so doing, creating new value for consumers, or for the environment, for the communities in which we're embedded. So there's our mandate. Let me start out with a question, and I'm going to open this up to the panel, and so you guys can fight for it, but what does it take to get into farming today? What characteristics of individuals are essential to being able to pull this off? If you're looking to lend to them, what are those telltale signs? If you're looking to train them in even the high school setting, Kelly, again, what are the characteristics? In the new farmers program, Adrian, Nick, just looking at the others that you have worked alongside throughout, your time at Native Hill and even before, and those who've stuck with it, and what did it take?
Like Adrian's probably met the most beginning farmers, so you might know best, I think.
Okay, so as I look and have experienced over the years those faces of beginning farmers, I often in conversation and trying to understand their characteristics, look for that ability to be brutally honest with themselves. Sort of in that SWOT analysis metaphor, if you will, that they can hold up a mirror and really understand what their strengths and weaknesses are. And with that, be willing to, with those weaknesses, try to bolster that knowledge or skills gap with other expertise on staff or additional learning. And this incredible amount of, in their soul, feeling this deep sense of purpose and love of agriculture that fuels this deeper amount of grit, if you will. Because the obstacles are many and often frequent that these producers are going to encounter, and if they don't have that inner place where that they can draw from, and that ability at times to get up and fight when they just don't have any energy left to do it, it's a short-lived business. So it's sort of, can you teach entrepreneurship? And some of these are inherent personality characteristics that I think can be learned, but some people come preloaded with those. So.
I would agree with that. I think I work with a group of people that tend to opt in to agriculture in our high school programs, and that's really exciting because they for some reason chose to pursue this. But once there, to retain them requires that that something a switch got turned. So there was some sort of motivation or some sort of intrinsic desire or something that they never saw before that they really get excited about. But I think more than anything else, it is that sense of excitement and motivation to really pursue what agriculture looks like. And I agree. I think it's the grit factor, and even at the university, right, to help our students find that resiliency factor, whatever that is, because that's what it's going to take to be successful in the industry.
I think they need strong independence, strong work ethic, need to have some experience in what they're wanting to do before they break out on their own. Do they have a mentor, whether it's a family member or somebody in the community that can give them a little bit of guidance, a little bit of support along the way? Are they coming at it from a business mindset or a lifestyle? It's great if you can come from a lifestyle, but most of us don't have that financial position that you need to have the business mindset, because it is a business, and you need to have that determination to make it work under that setup.
Yeah, I guess I would second everything you guys said and add luck, coincidence, and timing. That's what it felt like for us, and maybe some other things sprinkled in. But at least on our farm, we have had a number of employees that have gone off to become managers at other farms like ours or start their own operation. And for me, it's you just know it when you see it. And I think it's a lot of those values that they just said. And you really have to love it above all else. But as our farm lender says, profit preserves passion. You don't need dollar signs for eyeballs, but you got to make a living to make a living, if that makes sense. So.
Well, I intentionally asked this first question just kind of right off the cuff. What I'd like to do now is actually pull up a slide from the value chain study that we've done. Now, when I asked that question off the cuff, many of us just sort of went to an image in our own mind of what being a new farmer meant. But what this graphic is showing us is the numbers of farms within the state of Colorado within various size categories. Now, here they're measured by acreage, but it would be closely correlated if we measured it by, gross revenue or anything else like that. And they're every 5 years, according to the USDA Ag Census, starting in '97 through 2012. And what you can see is that, the dark parts of the bars up top, those are the large 2,000 acres or more farms. The number of them is maintained fairly stably, but, over the 15 years that we're looking at here, quite a number of those, well, some folks will have dropped out of farming in that category, and other people will have entered. So were you imagining one of those, a 5,000 acre wheat farm on the Eastern Plains, and what it takes as a characteristic to take that over as a family, maybe operator, versus the area where we've seen the most growth, which are in these smaller, really the 10 to 49 and the 50 to 179 acre categories. That's where we've seen the most growth within the state of Colorado. And Nick, you're probably into one of those categories, if even that, because of your intensive production model that you follow. Does it differ by size category, what it takes in terms of character to get in? And moreover, are you going to be more innovative as a new farmer at one of these categories? What do you all think?
Seems to me the smaller scale producers are probably in direct market channels, probably in specialty crops, niche livestock. Since we've seen this arena develop over the past 25 years of my experience intercepting this space in Colorado, it is increasingly becoming crowded, maybe, in some markets, no?
I would say there's room if there's the land and water to support it.
So, but wherever you are, you need to differentiate yourself in some way in that direct marketplace, right?
I think it does take that entrepreneurial drive to bring good food to your community, whatever that is, through dairy products or organic vegetables. So yeah, you definitely can't just grow it and hope someone shows up.
It's more so than the larger scale producers and commodity channels, right? So I think that's a differentiation or a difference in scale for sure.
And I guess just from my standpoint, I don't know how you would get into anything above in those acreages without, maybe you would be a tractor operator on one of those large farms. For someone that's not in that family or in money or something, there's no, I don't think, getting into those farms or buying a multi-thousand-acre wheat farm or something.
You've got a combination on some of the smaller farms. You're going to find probably most of them in the Front Range or the populated areas of the state. Part of them, it's not so much they're looking to make their living in farming. They bought an acreage in the country, and it's somewhat of a tax angle that they, will report their ag income and expenses versus what Nick's doing, trying to make a farm operation that is self-sustaining. We do see more of that in the Front Range, but again, it takes the population. You'll find it up here. If you go out to eastern Colorado, where I'm from, you're not going to see a lot of small farms starting out there because they don't have that population base to market their product to. And it is a different setup. When on smaller ones, you're coming in, you're trying to do it yourself, you're trying to get it going. You'll find on the larger ones that it's a family operation. They're doing more stuff, succession planning, more stuff, estate planning, trying to get that next generation in and sustain that. I won't say that's 100%. There's some of them that don't do that, but you're going to find more of that on that side of the larger farm than the smaller ones.
But even in those larger farms, Tom, there's maybe multiple people in that next generation who might be taking over. But do certain characteristics still stand out as to which one is going to be the better farmer in the next generation, the one that is a more reliable credit, a line of credit for you to extend to?
Yes, it's kind of like if you have kids, they can be night and day from each other. That's other families, it's the same thing. You'll usually see one of the younger members that takes a lead role, and they work into it over time. But yeah, you'll see kind of who's going to be the heir apparent to an operation. Sometimes they may blend activities depending on how large the operation is, what they can do, but they're still, as the next generation comes in, they're still going to emerge the leader in that group.
Sure. To wrap up our discussion about really the human capital, the characteristics, the training side of things here, Adrian, you made a comment that this is kind of like the question of whether one can teach entrepreneurship. Obviously, we do teach agriculture. We do teach a lot of farming skills, even within CSU, within the high schools. To what extent can this be trained? What formal programs? Obviously, the Beginning Farmers Program, the high school ag education programs. Can you tell us a little bit about the philosophy of how those are creating the new farmers? What are the skills that can be imparted that don't need to be ingrained or genetic, inherited along with the farm? And then maybe also from the lending point of view, Tom, are there certain certifications or trainings that you see to have been effective in helping people to succeed and therefore making them a better credit risk? But Adrian, maybe if you can pick up on your previous thought.
You bet. So I can speak really only from my experience in Colorado building farmers, which really intersects that specialty crops type producer into direct markets, sometimes specialized livestock. We on the onset of this program in 2007, and it was modeled off of other nationally recognized beginning farmer development programs, Farm Beginnings in the Midwest. We brought a rough outline of a curriculum to an advisory committee in Boulder County. And it included production-related skills, integrated pest management, irrigation, et cetera. This advisory committee composed of farmers, Natural Resources Conservation Service, other ag professionals. They quickly said to me, they're like, don't put the production stuff in there. That is the exciting stuff that beginning farmers are attracted to learn. They're drawn to that. It's sexy. It's fun. make sure that they leave this program learning business planning and management. So that's where we focused it as sort of a strategy or philosophy, if you will, and think that to the degree that we can impart those skills, and we think at the end of an 8-week short course, Principles of Business Planning and Management, they've developed a rough and sometimes can be a bit more sophisticated business plan that they can then take to a lender like Tom and maybe with a little more work compete for a loan. So,
Sure.
yeah.
Kelly, thoughts on that?
I think in our high school programs, we tend to focus a lot on the skills, right? So not just training the business principles, but really training the fundamental ag skills that we would see. I think there's a push to move our students into areas where there's greater chance for a high wage, high skill placement, or articulated into additional education, like here at CSU. And so I think it's easy for us to envision what that curriculum looks like for students at the high school level or at the university level. The production skill set, it's the disposition piece that I think is hard to train, right? And so you have to provide experiences which allow that disposition to develop. So, schools that have school farms, for instance, to train that disposition around that it's not just in your hour class, but extended experiences. Or school-based entrepreneurial or experiential learning projects that really can allow students to develop that extended discipline around what a production practice might be.
Well, and I'm a little surprised that you didn't jump into the FFA and 4-H with that because, well, let me ask it. To what extent are those curricula designed around skill development, or are they designed around encouraging or enhancing certain character traits, teaching discipline, teaching how to say goodbye to that steer at the end of the season, things like that?
For us, it's really hard for us to distinguish the differences, right? So
Okay.
I think it is all of those, and kind of we talk about a 3-part model of experiences: experiential learning, leadership development, and then the classroom component of kind of the skills and knowledge that students need. So for us, it's when we talk about ag education at the high school level, it's really hard for us to distinguish what's not one of those. It all kind of goes together in different ways. I think our challenge is when we see people that don't go through formal programs. So we get, I think Dr. Pritchett said that 2/3 of our students are coming without some sort of ag experience to our College of Ag. So our challenge then is if they don't do it at the high school and they don't do it in 4-H and they don't do it at the university, how do we get an adult learner those skills beyond that, right? So I think our challenge when we look at that workforce development, I think we have models which work, might need expanded, might need some innovation around them, but really how do we get those that are choosing to come into this at a different point? How do we get them the production skills necessary?
Right.
And I guess just a lot of our employees come to our farm looking to start their own farm, and it's kind of it's a horrible thing to deal with all the time, but it's great. So they're learning hard production skills. We do talk a bit about finances and stuff, but we used to always kick them off to Adrian and Martha and Karen for the business class in the fall. But we see people that could run their own farm next year with support and mentoring, but we just don't. There's really no place for them to do that. Like a literal farm for them to do that. So these aren't people that are coming from land. So these are people that I would feel confident in them running their own farm. We do have employees that have their own farms now. They had to move out of state to afford a farm. So I think for me that's the main challenge. It's not really. There's massive resources I think out there to kick them into CSU or building farmers and be on the farm getting paid to learn specifically what they want to learn. But where do you go? That's, for me, what I think about every day.
I think in an ideal world, if we could marry up some of the classroom-based instruction that we're doing with the experiential knowledge on a farm, my sense is we've always learned agriculture as a civilization by doing it.
Sure.
And we can only talk about it in a classroom for so long, where you need to get on a farm and get dirty with folks in the field, doing those skills on native hill. Yeah.
For sure. I went to school for engineering and then worked on a student organic farm at Clemson University, and then worked on a number of farms before deciding to start our own. My wife and I started our own farm, and so that it's hard to find that balance, I feel like. Yeah.
The biggest challenge as an extension client is someone that comes to me and says, I want to do this, but I've never experienced it. I'm like, really? This would be like starting a restaurant, but I've never worked in a kitchen. I've never had that experience, but I'm going to go do it. And some people succeed with that, that's to be sure, but it's a challenging pathway. And as a service provider, it's a challenge to figure out how to really help that person in a way that's effective and efficient.
Well, and I think, too, if we put ourselves in the historical context that you raised there, and you look at this graphic in front of us, we're in a new world today relative to the 50 years prior to that. Because for that entire time, this graphic was sloping downward. The numbers of farms in America were decreasing. And so really the only people taking up farming were those who, of the 3 children of a family, had learned by doing since they can remember, and were then at the point of being able to take it over. We're in a new world now, though, where it's turned upward again since the late 90s. We have more farms now than we did in the mid-90s, and most of that growth is coming in these smaller areas. And so folks coming in from outside that don't necessarily have a farm background are starting to play that matching process, and that's what we're struggling with here to a certain degree. And it's, in some sense, maybe a good problem to have as a society, but it raises new questions for our existing structures and training systems. And in particular, to maybe move us on into some of the topics, Nick, that you're bringing up, one of those big challenges is the affordability, the financial capital question. So let's turn our focus to that now. And maybe, Tom, you could lead us off with this just by telling us a little bit about the kinds of programs that are available through Ag Credit, but then I'd invite any of the rest of you to chime in about additional programs that are potentially there to help someone like a Nick to raise the capital or to bootstrap. The old saying, and there's 3 ways to get into farming, right? There's matrimony, patrimony, and parsimony. You marry in, you're born in, or you're really, really frugal with those nickels and dimes and somehow cobble together the financing in order to buy your way in and bootstrap your way up. But of those, I guess we're kind of talking about that third one. And if you were to do that, what are your avenues? What are your ways in? How do you get access to capital?
Okay, with American Ag Credit, part of what we do is we have the Young Beginning Small Farm Program. We look for some options that we can make something work. Can we work with the Farm Service Agency to either on a guarantee or they make a direct loan, we make a direct loan to get the percentage that people need? Can we work with a co-signer that's a family member that will help them out? We have, depending on the operation and kind of the background experience they have, we've got some programs that we're working with to try and, I guess, drop down our credit standards. That's kind of a good news, bad news thing that for the right operation that can work, but increased leverage isn't always your friend. So we have to look at the operation pretty hard if we're going to reduce those standards and let you take on more risk to go into that. If you're doing that with a corner wheat farm and trying to go on thin margins, that's going to be pretty tough. It probably works more like for someone like Nick that he has put a lot of labor into his product, but there's a higher net return typically on the produce than what you're going to see on the commodity side. So we try to find some combinations in there that we can make work. but it's still difficult.
We're in a unique place I alluded to earlier in Boulder County in terms of land access. We have public ag land that can be leased to farmers, and it has at least been, and I think really I can speak to both county and city of Boulder, there is a priority of trying to open up lands for these types of beginning farmers. There are places where with even low rents on these properties, and some of these may be at $100 an acre thereabouts with water. There may be limited infrastructure existing on the property and limitations to add infrastructure to that property. Also, so there's this interesting conundrum that we have where there is this land availability, sometimes great senior water rights. However, unless you've had your head in the sand, you realize housing costs in Colorado are going through the roof. So how do farms establish businesses and then create a wage rate significant enough for those workers to actually live in that county? That's one of the things we're running into. So it's not straightforward.
Sure.
Yeah.
As far as access to financial capital for us, we lease all of our land, so we do not own any land, hence this other project we're starting here in Larimer County. But we work directly with the Farm Service Agency as our lender for we don't ever get an operational loan. It's mainly just for large equipment pushes for efficiency so that we can pay someone a wage that they could live in this county. It's kind of and it's only going to get worse. And I imagine it's not going to track with the price of carrots per se. Real estate's going to appreciate faster than we can raise it. So we have to get more efficient, which means equipment loans and mechanization. But just to give you a unique thing, looking at this graph, our farm is about 10 acres. We have about 7 in production. We would have to be a 2,000 acre corn silage farm to make roughly the same income that we do off of 7 acres. So that's probably why you're seeing some growth down there. And it's it really what limits us is that what is not a problem in Boulder County is finding a stable place where we can build a wash and pack house and better refrigeration and a loading dock so we can do this for the long haul and not destroy our bodies and create good, what I see as good jobs for people. Maybe it's not the one household earner working at Native Hill, but it could be a decent salary and maybe even employee ownership as we move forward if we can keep that going. So.
We see these challenges even in our secondary programs where every student has to have an individualized project, and students just don't have that background or experience anymore in our high school programs. So they're not coming, even in our rural areas, the students are not coming with that resource base, those SAEs that their families own and operate. And so we've started a grant program. We've had a couple funders that have started a grant program. We give out 40 grants a year to high school students to start their programs. That's from our state FFA Foundation. But it's access to even starting on a small scale, trying to get those principles put in is a challenge. So we've taken that on to try to push that down to our high school students.
We also do a program for 4-H and FFA students where we'll loan them the $1,000 to $1,500 to get their project going to try and encourage some of that.
And that's just a little nudge up. So we've received quite a diversity of questions from the audience here. And I don't think we can give time to all of them, and some of them may be better directed to Dawn and Becca and I from the previous presentation. One, though, that I just thought might be kind of interesting, Tom, for you to comment on. One person has asked, what about a land bank to new farmer, to provide new farmer loans subsidized by the state? And this is a very honest question that arises from our society, but as we know from our perceptions survey, we're 2 or 3 generations off the farm, and many of the people who live in the Front Range don't even really know about the farm credit system that you have spent your life career with. So would you like to share just a little bit more about that aspect of the farm credit system?
Okay, well, the land bank, yeah, it's the term I started with, but it's one that I haven't heard for quite a while. We started as Federal Land Bank and Production Credit Association, and we're celebrating our 100th year. And it was Congress started us to fill a need in ag finance, and it started pretty basic 100 years ago. It was, I'm amazed that we have got to the point that we are now with the meager start that we made, but there has been continued demand for that. Ag is all we do. You won't find us downtown on Main Street with a loan down there. Everything's got to be have an ag base to it, but that includes processing and other things. It's not always just production ag. The co-bank works with cooperatives. They also do some rural electric and infrastructure for rural communities. So there's some variations that get included into ag. In addition, not completely through farm credit, but the state does have a program to try and help down payments. It's a tax-based program, so it doesn't work as well with the farm credit system because we're under a different tax structure than what some commercial banks would be. But there are some programs out there for that.
Great. Well, we'd love to take more. We're at the end of the time that we've allotted to the panel discussion. I would like to invite you to help me in thanking these guys. And we're now I'm going to invite Dawn to come back up to the front and start to shift us into an opportunity for us to widen the dialogue now beyond maybe 2 or 3 of the cross-cutting issues to all 8 of them within a process here in the room. Thanks again, folks.
And again, it seems like there's never enough time, so what I would ask the panelists to do if they're willing is, since the next thing is a small group exercise and some of the topics we'll be talking about is in their wheelhouse, that they maybe stay, and that's a way that they can engage with those of you who have more questions for them. I did want to point out that there's several ways for you to give feedback now, whether you're here, you're joining us by live stream, or even if you're here and you need more time to digest some of this information. What we're going to have you do now is choose one of those 8 issue areas, and I'll remind you of them again here in a little bit. And there's posters around the room that not only have that highlight topic, but have all the action items we gleaned from different people we talked to this year. And we're going to basically ask you to take those stickers you should have gotten if you didn't get your 8 stickers, and you get to kind of vote a little bit. So you get to go put dots on those action items you really think you would see as a priority, you see an imperative need for, you want to be involved in, and you can do anything from visiting just one of those topic areas to visiting every one of the 8 posters and making 1 vote per poster. If you feel like you need more time to digest this and want to give us feedback later, or if you're at home watching this, you can download the reports that are posted on the website that I'll show you again in a second. And there's a Qualtrics survey link at that same site where you can go and give the same type of feedback in a slightly modified form. And obviously you'll miss out on the conversation we might have in the room. So what you do is you go to thefoodsystems.colostate.edu. I'll pull that up again here when I'm done talking. And there's actually a button where it's going to say reports, and there's a place where you can, again, download the reports that are in a fuller context of what we talked about today and fill out a Qualtrics survey related to them. And again, to get to that link, I'll leave this screen up that I'm going to go to so you can look at it. It's on the foodsystems.colostate.edu website below, but since that team has several projects, you want to click on the blueprint content area, and that's where all the materials we talked about are today. So for those of you who are in the room and are willing to stay with us for another bit of time, again, rotating around the room, we have all of the 8 issue areas we already addressed today. Some of them you already heard kind of talked about more fully with the panel we had up here. But whether you want to go and spend a little time and the rest of your time talking about just one of those, or if you want to rotate around and look at all of them, what we ask you to do is engage in a conversation one way, either interactively with hosts that we have from Colorado Food Systems Advisory Council standing there, or with your dots, voting with your dots about what things you really want to see us or different partners we work with embrace. So again, just as a review, and we're going around the room, there is a whole issue area about creating and retaining ag and food firms. There's one about developing workforce and youth to support the food and ag sectors. There's one about promoting the Colorado brand. There's one about supporting a business and consumer-friendly regulatory environment. In the back, we have addressing how scale impacts market performance, access, and opportunities. And over to the other side, we have innovating and supporting new technology for food and ag businesses, improving access to capital, and again, capital is financial, but also land and water for food and ag and food firms. And then finally, integrating agriculture and vibrant communities. And although there's food access and security issues embedded in all these, that's where the majority of those are. So we invite you to go engage with those posters, read them a bit, talk to the host if you have any points of clarification. We'll be in the room. And most importantly, either today with the dots or by visiting our website and looking through the report and using the Qualtrics survey, we love your feedback about what things are top of mind for you. We did get some questions. We decided we want to use your time today to have these small group discussions, but in some way, shape, or form on the website, and we will be posting the live stream for today. We'll make sure those questions get addressed by the team. So thank you, and again, you can grab more snacks, but please feel free to visit the posters now and grab any of us you want to give some feedback to. Thank you, guys, and you have till 4 o'clock.